Telehealth and telemedicine is a huge industry utilizing live video streaming today, and we are going to talk about it in reference to what Wowza has been doing within that industry. Barry, I know you've worked quite a bit with some telehealth and telemedicine companies in the past with Wowza. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those experiences?
Yeah, Wowza has quite a history of working with various people in the field. Um, Anywhere from, use cases where some of the original use cases for streaming in telehealth, telemedicine, things like scopes, video-enabled devices. From the get-go, almost some of these devices had the ability to do video. What we see as, you know, streaming became more prevalent is now you can actually stream that video both internally and externally, and maybe bring in an expert to look at something while it's going on. So that's been a common use case for us in the past. I think they're becoming more prevalent now.
In the cases of consulting, like what you're talking about, is having the connection be very low latency important to many people?
Um, yeah, I mean, if I would think that if you're trying to interact with somebody remotely and they're going to say, "Hey, stop, go back. Hey, turn this way, turn that way." Obviously, you need some low latency, or the person running the thing's never going to be able to catch up and find out what was going on.
What kind of concerns or issues do companies come to us with that are trying to implement live video streaming and maybe need some help on certain parts of the technology?
Um, Reliability is certainly one. Quality is one. You want to get the best possible output, under whatever conditions you happen to have. And of course, with healthcare, security is a big deal. Things need to be encrypted. Things need to be delivered in such a way that someone without the proper credentials doesn't have access. So things like this, and really, it can be all of those combined, and people are just struggling with, how do I do this end to end? I have an idea. I need a streaming expertise to actually make this idea come to life.
All right. Can you share any of these experiences with us? Some use cases where we've had to come in and consult and help basically resolve the issues they're having?
Yeah, absolutely. We were working with a company recently that was building um, devices for remote patient monitoring, typically in underserved areas. And they needed a device that could be on site that could capture both video, but also data, and be able to stream that back to a central location where someone could be monitoring that and evaluating it, and potentially acting on it. And they didn't know streaming. They didn't know what the capabilities were and some of the things you could do. And they needed us to help them actually work through specifications on cameras and devices and things like that to be able to build this relatively small, inexpensive package that they could deploy in areas where they didn't have a lot of funds to do so. So the costs were important. You wind up looking at things like Raspberry Pis and other things like that because they're inexpensive, easy to deploy, easy to replace. These guys aren't talking six-figure medical devices they can plunk down in all these remote areas. It had to be something much more unique and efficient.
Now, it sounds like this isn't necessarily something that needs to be low latency either. I think, like you said, there's other examples of where we've worked with schools or businesses that their focus was more education or monitoring.
Or for education, latency typically isn't a huge deal. Education, and I would say maybe observation. The remote monitoring, it depends, right? Particularly if the device sends an alarm for low pulse ox or something, you'd probably want to know about that as soon as possible. Um, the video portion of that may not be as important as the data in some of these use cases.
Okay. Um, has the pandemic made a difference in terms of more companies being interested in utilizing live video?
Yeah, the pandemic greatly accelerated adoptions of some of these things. I believe most of these things were coming anyway, um, but the pandemic certainly accelerated. You know, Number one, remote doctor consultations. I mean, prior to the pandemic, it was expensive and or difficult both for the doctors and the insurance companies and the patients to justify these remote consultations. And obviously the pandemic changed all that, and now it's very common, and I think that will continue because it's just convenient for everyone. I think remote consultations in general, whether that be bringing an expert in to consult with another doctor at another facility, things like that, became much more commonplace because these experts could no longer travel. There's always been people who go get a second opinion or bring in an expert to get a second opinion, particularly in research settings and things like that. And being able to do that over video with high quality and exchanging information such as x-rays or scans or whatever over very high quality, I think that accelerated quite a bit during the pandemic.
What other needs have you seen? I mean, I'm sure you have from professional services many clients coming in, getting at least requesting help with things. What are you seeing today? What kind of requests are you getting?
So some of the things we're starting to see are really quite fascinating. So, where we're talking about, remote education, remote consultation and things like that. But now we're talking about folks wanting to stream operating room theaters in 360 VR. So the viewer now actually has control over the angle they're looking at and what they're seeing, and they can kind of move around the room. Really fascinating, really adds another layer of richness and depth to what you can do. And it also individualizes the experience, so, to contrive a case a bit, but let's say you have a knee operation and you have a bunch of students. It's like they may want to see this, student A wants to see it from this angle, student B wants to see it from that angle. So I think it's a really interesting development we're seeing, and it feels like 360 VR is starting to make a bit of a comeback overall, and becoming more mainstream uses, and healthcare is certainly one of them.
No, I can imagine a student wanting to focus on something different than another student when they're watching the
Yeah,
same
absolutely.
screen. And certainly being able to see it with a VR headset makes a huge
Right.
difference in the quality of what they're seeing too.
Absolutely.
I think back to, when I think about school, I just imagine a giant projector in a theater, and that's
Yeah.
that's all you get, right? So what else do you
Yeah,
think
it's
we're
much
gonna?
more personalized experience now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what else do you think we'll see in the future in terms of how live video streaming is being integrated with other technologies?
I think that we touched on this a bit before with the devices that are collecting data and things like that. But this whole notion of the medical Internet of Things and all these things being able to contribute um, a constant stream of data, and of which video can be a part: video, audio, data. And once you have all these things coming in, then you start to see, hey, how can I apply artificial intelligence and machine learning things to notice things or see things, right? I mean, think about you have a nurse's station where there's a bunch of monitors in all the patients' rooms. It's very difficult for a nurse to focus on 40 rooms at once to see if anything's going on. But if you can apply some artificial intelligence algorithms, you could say, hey, that person's out of bed, they're not supposed to be. Hey, that person fell, or even to the point of, wow, that person looks like they're in pain. And then we can react. And I think you're going to start to see this kind of weave its way in, and really with some real interesting use cases, I think.
All right. Well, hey Barry, thank you for chatting with me about this. And for those of you who are interested in knowing more, please check us out at wowza.com.
Thanks a lot.